Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. So my guest today is Sanjay Mirchandani, who's the CEO at Commvault. And if I mispronounced your name, my apologies. Please correct me.
You got it right.
Sanjay is a former corporate SVP and GM at VMware and executive VP and CIO at EMC, just to name two of his former corporate accomplishments. There is a long list, but now CEO at Commvault. And we're going to talk today about how he sort of created this entrepreneurial spirit within Commvault to create this internal startup called Metallic, which exceeded $50 million in revenue, ARR, in just 6 quarters, which I think will be a fascinating story. In addition to getting to hear about his transition from being a CIO to being a CEO and many other topics around Commvault and their amazing growth. So thank you, Sanjay, for making time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me, Karen. Good to be here.
Thank you. So I want to talk about you and your leadership, but I also want to talk a bit about Commvault. Maybe we could start there. So Commvault is an organization with sort of a longer history than many tech firms. So could you talk a little bit about the history of Commvault?
Sure.
And I'm also curious, out of all the places you could have taken yourself, why did you accept the CEO role at Commvault?
No, absolutely. So Commvault, we're in one business. We do data protection. And since our inception as a company, I think we were back in 1988, and then we went public in 2006. And, we do one thing. We help our customers protect mission critical data. And back when we started, it was, you keep it on tape, you keep it off site, you worried about, accidental erasures, and you worried about natural disasters taking your data center out, what have you. And we continue to keep our customers' data safe. And now we sort of also look after their data in the light of cyber threats, ransomware attacks, things like that. So the premise may have changed, the vector of protection may have changed over the years, over the 25, 26 years of the company. But what we do hasn't. We've been very true to our cause of helping our customers sleep better at night because their companies and their data are protected. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. We protect data.
Yeah. So it's sort of a different take on many of the companies I speak with have this transition they've been trying to get their customers to do from going on-prem to the cloud. And in some ways, that's exactly what's been happening here. It's just that on-prem, in your case, may have been an actual vault, right, for some people.
It's where it's where data's never been, I would say data's never been more valuable for companies, and also hasn't been never been more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay, because the bad guys don't necessarily want your warehouse or your trucks. They want your data. They want the stuff that runs your business, the intelligence, the IP, the crown jewels are around the data. And as I think the move to the cloud was significantly accelerated during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Most business continuity strategies for companies were, okay, if I have 3 data centers and 2 go out, I have one that I can fall back on, and stuff like that, which kind of got challenged when humans couldn't walk into data centers anywhere on the planet. And at that point, what do you do? So the cloud became a very natural destination. It wasn't everybody's roadmap, but it got accelerated. And when that got accelerated, the on-prem, off-prem quickly became hybrid, and everyone's now in the hybrid world. There are workloads that are constantly moving between your own data centers and the cloud. So that is reality in the world we live in.
And was Commvault prepared for that shift? I mean, in a sense, no one could have been prepared for, whatever the 60 days or so in early 2020 when it became clear that we were having a pandemic and things had to change right away. But were you set up in a way that made that easy? Were you already cloud friendly?
We were a distributed company by way of our own human resources. We have teams around the world, engineering teams are around the world. We kind of go where the talent is. And our technology was always built to be remotely managed, to be remotely sort of handled. And outside of, if a customer has a server and they need to rack and stack something and wire it up, we could pretty much do everything remotely. So we went into overdrive as a company when we realized this thing was here to stay, and this whole remote world became very real for everyone. When customers were scrambling, trying to figure out how to scale VPNs and get the basic infrastructure in place, because not every company was designed to be that way, right? What we did was just sort of help our customers with remote deployment, remote management, remote backups, being able, and then we turned around and just put all our resources available to customers to sort of tap into, whether it's enablement, training. We even give Metallic, which we'll talk about, away for free at that point in time for customers to sort of manage their endpoints, their desktops. Now, suddenly customers who were so used to having their employees wired into their network and on-premise, suddenly employees are working remotely. Well, what's the data protection strategy at that point? Well, at that point, we just gave away Metallic for I think 2 quarters almost, and said to customers or non-customers, anyone who wanted to back up and stay protected, we gave it to them to use. So we turned on a dime, actually. It was work. Obviously, it was work because it changed the dynamic of everything around everything. But we did it very quickly with our customers in mind because they were even more vulnerable at that point.
Great. And so if I've read right, you've been at Metallic about a year before the pandemic hit. I'm curious, Metallic, geez, you were at Commvault. I'm curious about what attracted you to Commvault.
Yes,
in
you
particular.
did ask me that question and I didn't answer it. So, I've been very fortunate that I spent time in companies that were creating big chunks of the industry at that moment, whether it was the internet, whether it was, productivity tools like the stuff, the creations that Microsoft had. And I went on to EMC, where, they really made the data center come alive with their technology and, infrastructure there. And then VMware with what they did with the hypervisor. And then I went on to Puppet, which is all about automation and, really driving efficiencies with automation. I always ask myself, I have to be passionate about the technology that I work with. I really have to love what I do. And it has to have purpose for customers. And putting my CIO hat on, I said, what's the next big challenge? And the next big challenge that kept popping up was data. People were the hard questions in some ways had been answered, right? What do I mean by that? When I was CIO, I spent an inordinate amount of time convincing my internal customers that we were using the right technology. I mean, as the CIO, the tools of my trade were not the tools of my trade. It was really about convincing the business that we were doing the right thing. And it was really about, what database are you using? What servers are you using? What infrastructure are you going to design it with, et cetera, et cetera. Well, those are not questions CIOs should be answering anymore. I hope they're not. It's, you're obviously working in the hybrid cloud. You're obviously, the tools of the trade are fairly understood. Development methodologies were fairly unique. If you took this stack, you had to use this development methodology. If you went to that stack, you had to use this one. Today with the cloud, it's your choice. Yeah. It's not as hard coded. Okay. And so the big decisions, if you would, or the contentious decisions are kind of decided, are kind of directionally known. You're going to use Kubernetes. You're going to use containers. You're going to be hybrid cloud. You're going to use, those things are kind of understood. So the next big frontier that everyone should be thinking about and is thinking about is data. And when Commvault called, I was like, wait a minute. I know these guys. I know them from my previous life when we competed. And they always had great technology, great IP. And when they called, I was genuinely curious as to, what the opportunity meant for, not just for me, but for customers. Was there runway to really assist our customers? And it was very clear to me within a few conversations that, I was very lucky they called me.
Yeah. I'll assume that was because of the opportunity in front of you and what was possible, in addition to maybe the team.
There's a few things that have to come together in my mind, and in my simple math, they came together. One was, do you actually solve a hard problem for customers? Okay, I mean, it's not just solving a problem. You solve a really hard problem, one they may or may not have encountered yet, but will. And the answer was yes. Number two, do you have the best-in-class technology or IP in this case to do that? And the answer was yes. And three, do you have the culture, the people, and the drive to get it right? And the answer to me very quickly with a few conversations, but these were great people with a great culture. And I was really, really pleased. They embraced me and they said, okay, so what do we want to go out and do? And when the three things came together, and it's not a perfect science, but it's definitely well-baked, in my thinking, I knew this was the right choice, and I've never looked back.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to talk to someone who had such a clear framework for making that kind of decision. and then to have it all play out is terrific. So you came into this organization that had a long history. And I mean, obviously, some of the other organizations you'd work with also had long histories. And I would think that the challenge would be taking that kind of an organization, and organizations tend to get bogged down, and sort of get slower and tend to have more procedures and less seat of the pants when they get to be both old and slow. And you had to sort of ramp them up to be prepared for sort of the demands of today's clients and customers. So I'm very curious about how you did that. And that might take us into the Metallic story and how you started that as an internal startup.
Sure. The team, it wasn't me. We had great IP, continue to have great IP, over 1,000 patents for a company of our size. So great technology. We were in a space that definitely was important, always had been mission critical, got even more important with the pandemic. And when I sat with the team and we really and I talked to customers and I talked to partners, the issues at hand that we had to sort of go tackle were very understandable. When you've been in business a long time and you, like you said, you sort of evolve a certain way. And in the time we were at, the cloud was front and center for us. Our technology is incredibly valuable in the cloud, but there was some work to be done. And I summarized that, and I've been talking about that at my earnings calls and since then, the 3+ years, is we had to simplify our business models. Okay, it's just good hygiene to go back in and look at how you do things, and are you being simple? Are you easy to do business with? Is it easy to come on into the company and get onboarded? Is all of those things. Simplify. Don't take your foot off the innovation pedal. And innovation not just in technology, but programs and pricing strategies and cloud enablement. So really innovate, and then just say what you're going to do and go do it, execute. So we called it, simplify, innovate, execute. We called it 6 internally, and we just went after it, and we 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 just didn't stop, and we haven't stopped. In fact, I took our chief accounting officer, Gary Merrill, who I had the pleasure of getting to know on my first day on the job, and within a week, I had Gary in a role of just, I took him out of the chief accounting officer role and said, go help me get this thing done, operationally simplify our business, and that's your JD. And he took it to heart. He's just gone to work. He's now our CFO as of July 1st, but would really partnered with me and the rest of the team to do exactly that. And so we were blessed in that we had solid fundamentals. The company was a well-run company. We had cash on the balance sheet. We had no debt at the time I came in. We had great IP, over 1,000 patents. We had great people. We had a customer base that had been with us for years and continued to value what we did and work with us. I'm like, this is a jewel. Okay, so we didn't have to go out and raise money, and we didn't have to do the things that you would otherwise have to do. We just had to define what it is, what the North Star was for us, and it was simplify, innovate, execute. Just everybody get to work, and let's just make sure we're all heading in the same direction. And then be very clear, what are you going to do? And let's go get it done. And if you can't get it done, let's talk about why. And we just kept iterating, and we kept iterating. And what I told our shareholders was, I am focused on bringing this company back to responsible growth. And for the last 3 years, we've done exactly that. We have really worked hard on growing. Our annual recurring revenue has grown 14% CAGR in the last 3 years. Our software and product revenues have grown 14%. Our total revenue has grown 7%. So, one quarter at a time, one day at a time, but we are working hard at responsible growth, and I think we're doing it.
Yeah, wonderful. I love the process, and a wonderful story about your new CFO. Really taking on what sounds to me like a giant change management process with these 3 very clear outcomes. So along the way, you launched an internal startup, Metallica, that has gone on to great success. Could you talk a little bit about how the idea came to do it as internal startup, why, and then sort of how you manage that process?
So, Metallic came about as something that within weeks of my coming on board, we made a decision to build a SaaS product, data management as a service.
Yep.
And we knew very well at the time that it may not be the right time to be mainstream, but it will become that way as more customers move to the cloud, more applications are SaaS-based. And then the natural tendency would be to protect it in the same way, cloud native. So I just come out of a late stage startup company called Puppet, and I've been very exposed to the startup community, and I'd invested in a bunch of startups, and I'd seen how they work and sort of the model they had, and the importance of the independence, agility, and failing fast.
Mm.
Okay, and what to your early point, what bigger companies tend to do is become more process oriented, and it stifles some of that agility if not done right. And so we knew the cloud was going to be key. Our core technology was already very cloud centric, but we needed a real world class data management as a service capability. So I literally went to my chairman and I said, I'm going to do this, and we're going to find the money on the inside, and then we're going to carve out a team and give them absolute freedom with only one caveat, that the core backup technology has to be from Commvault, because we are very good at what we do. Now, what they have to go do is build the best as a service experience, a next generation as a service capability, and they have nothing holding them back. Go. I gave them I basically funded them. Here's the budget. Gary, my now CFO, and myself was sort of the governance body on this thing. We took an existing leader at the time, put him on point to drive this. We took some really smart engineering folks who are still running a big chunk of this product and said, the Commvault backup technology, bring it to bear. We hired people from the outside who had SaaS backgrounds, and we just basically did a startup. I funded a startup. I even told them they could get off the campus and go somewhere else and get an office in New York if they wanted and go. But they chose to take some of our best rooms in the building and hunker down. They shut the door. They basically created Metallic. And at the time, it wasn't called Metallic. And we funded it, I think, in Feb of 19. And in October, at our customer conference, we announced it and previewed it. It wasn't in full availability. It was going to be available by Jan. And it was in limited feature functionality, as you'd imagine. And then the pandemic happened. And then we opened it up for free to customers to use. And they did. And then that also gave us a lot of time to say, okay, this is real. I don't know how fast the dial is going to turn towards the mix between on-prem and off-prem, but we have a winner here. We have something that could be a real winner. And the secret sauce was the power of and, what we call the power of and. Customers shouldn't have to choose between on-premise or SaaS. They need they need both, because your data lives in both places and it's transferring, moving back and forth. And our architecture for Metallic was based on the core architecture that had made us who we are, and we were able to leverage it with a absolute next generation world-class user experience. So we got the best of both worlds. So that was the making, the genesis, if you would, of Metallic.
Yeah, fabulous. And if I heard you correctly, you did that in February of 19, which was like almost the same time you joined.
Plus or minus, if memory serves me right, it was either February or March. But that's when we approved it, and that's when we curated a small team, and we gave them free rein to go do what they needed to do, and with very light touch.
Yeah,
very light.
Congrats. And I love that it was led by a current employee.
Yeah. And then over time, obviously, like any startup, we morphed and we brought in from the outside, from the inside. But the core team, plus or minus, is very much still at the helm of the business.
Yeah, terrific. So you talked about Commvault's growth over the last few years, tremendous, enviable for many growth on all those metrics. How did you manage and lead your team through that growth? I can make up a story about the infrastructure issues that might have come up or whatever, but how did you lead through that?
Well, we were a company that over the 20 plus years that we were in business before I got there, it was a profitable company, a well-run company. We had great fundamentals, a great balance sheet. And there's a lot of ups and downs in this industry. There's a lot of macro things that change, and trends and cloud and things like that. But one of the things that we all agreed upon, the board, myself, our employee base, as I communicated, was responsible growth. It wasn't about growth at any cost. It was about being responsible. Shareholder value, employee value, great investing in the future with IP. Like we built Metallic. Metallic's going to be a force to reckon. It's already 50 million ARR at 6 quarters, right? And growing. And it's going to be a force to reckon with. I believe that. And what we said was, let's really prioritize what we want to do. Let's not get into 15 different businesses or think this is cool. Let's, what we do well and what there is a need for is great data protection. And the pandemic, like a year into my tenure, really gave us a tailwind where, customers suddenly moved data protection to the top of the heap because it was really, there's so many IT priorities. What are we going to focus on? And after the initial, let's go remote, let's do VPNs, let's do security infrastructure, it became, okay, how do we protect our data? Because ransomware attacks went up. And then it was not about esoteric solutions. It was about a left to right view on all things data. And we were really able to ride with that, help our customers through that, and continue to. So, it was about focusing on what we do, doing it really well, coming back to our mantra of simplify, innovate, execute, and staying focused. And focus was for us responsible growth.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's not about at any cost, growing at any cost. It's about, which makes as a public company, and it's tough being in our business as a public company because a lot of our competitors are not public. Yeah. And so different rules apply. But we've done a decent job in spite of all of that and growing and delivering shareholder value. I mean, we've grown Metallic entirely on our own P&L, right? Entirely. And yet over the last 3 years, our non-GAAP EBIT margins have gone up over 30%, 35, 36%. So returning great margins while growing the business, while growing overall. So responsible growth. That's our internal mantra. That's what's kept everybody in line.
Yeah. You said earlier that you were glad Commvault called after you talked with them. And it sounds like they are very happy that you answered that call, given the results that have occurred over the last few years. It also occurs to me that, the basis of data protection is trust, right? Trust and verify, of course, but that there are different rules for startups versus public companies. And that the fact that you are committed to growing responsibly, for me, would just increase the trust that you're going to be doing the right thing. So
you want to believe, to your point, you want to entrust your data to a company that's going to be around, that you can measure their financials, know that they're valid, they're sustainable, they know what they're doing, they're investing in IP. It's not a black box. We could take our, any of our earnings reports and tear them apart and you know exactly where we're going and are we being consistent or not. And I think customers, especially in uncertain times, Karen, especially in uncertain times, and we've had no shortage of that, appreciate, companies that they know they can rely on, that they'll be around in the long haul to do business with. So we try and make sure we do that.
Yeah, agreed. Gosh, I have like 14 other questions I want to ask you, but I'll just ask briefly. We'll just switch to the leadership track now. So this transition you made from CIO to CEO, I think it'd be interesting for people to hear sort of what that was like for you.
So I was an accidental CIO. I had never had any aspirations of being a CIO. I think I upset the IT organization way too many times and they decided to pull me in. No, I was, I never. I had sold to CIOs. I had worked with CIOs. I had friends who were CIOs. And then when I was tapped on the shoulder to be a CIO, I didn't understand why. And my chairman at the time and CEO at the time was Joe Tucci, who I admire greatly. And Joe said, because you're going to be the best CIO ever. And I'm like, come on, Joe, you're selling me. And he goes, maybe. But I said, what do you want? Why would I be the right person to help you?
Yeah.
And I paraphrase, and he said, you understand how technology should be used. And I want you to give us as a company bragging rights. I need bragging rights. And when you're IT for a tech company, getting, that's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Because I used to say that there were 50,000 employees in the company and one CIO, but 49,999 thought they were the CIO. Okay. And with that challenge, you use good common sense and say, okay, if I were receiving this technology, if I were the customer of this technology, which I was till yesterday, and I kept my other portfolio, so I became CIO in addition to the portfolios that I had, and there I was a customer of IT. What grade would I give IT? What are the things? What lens would I measure this against? Can somebody on the outside do it better than my own IT organization? And so the bar became pretty high pretty quickly. Now, it was a very interesting journey, and I learned more about the business of a Fortune 150 company than I could ever have done if you had rotated me into every department for the next 5 years. Because whether it was supply chain, whether it was production, whether it was the factories, whether it was, sales, whether I was in every business, and not just understanding it, but it was about optimizing it. And when I became CIO, it was 2008, 9, 10, 11, that period of time where the world was also going through a great, change level of uncertainty with the financial crisis and what have you. So every dollar you spent had to have returns, and every dollar you didn't spend made you weaker if you missed it. So it was a lot of pressure. And I learned more about our business and about a big business than I ever could have. And that sort of got me excited about saying, hey, maybe I can actually be a CEO, and then sort of actually followed that track to see if I got the right opportunity to be a CEO. And I was so glad that I was asked to be.
Did.
I mean, some of the mails I got, and I joke about it, I used to write a blog quite frequently at the time with Patrick Cooley, who's also with me now. And I used to say CIO. One of my friends who was a CIO at the time said, when career is over. CIO stands for career is over. Why do you want to be a CIO? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is death knell to my career. It turned out to be the best thing.
It's a launching pad.
Second best thing to the one I have now. I'll be honest with you. And I wouldn't have had this job, I don't think, if I didn't have a CIO perspective. Even today, when I look at our technology, I always put myself in my old job to say, how would I receive this? How would I think about this? What would I be looking for? What's my decision-making process? And that's a great filter to have. I'm blessed to have that filter. So, and I'm so glad that Joe tapped me on the shoulder to do that job. And I really thought for a while that, oh my God, I must have upset somebody. Yeah. And that turned out to be one of the best things ever. So
Perfect.
You never know what to do.
It's so interesting. I tell my consulting clients, with rare exception, almost any senior person can do another senior person's role. We just do it differently because we bring these different backgrounds and experiences to it. But to think about CIO as a launching pad for CEO is unusual. I see a lot of CSOs or CROs that are moving into the CEO role today, but not so many CIOs. But yeah.
It baffles me why not.
Yeah.
Because you're exposed to, if you want to be, you're exposed to every single facet of the business.
Yeah.
There's nothing that you don't understand or see. So, and you're helping solve problems.
Yeah.
You're helping solve operational problems and actually drive productivity. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to really learn everything there is to learn.
Yeah. And you came to it with the background that you brought to it, right? So a different lens maybe than CIO who might have been just more in the vertical.
And consulting. And so I had sold into CIOs. But the whole point there was, you're a service organization. Hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
And, how long does it take you to get a proposal back to an internal group who's looking to do something? If it takes you 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that's not agile.
Yeah.
A third party would give it to you in 48 hours. So let's compete with the best.
Yeah.
And, so.
Yeah, all those bragging rights. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that was. I remember that like it was yesterday. He said, "Sanjay, I want bragging rights." And
what a great target to give someone. So we're almost out of time, Sanjay. My last question for all of my guests are simply this up into the right question. So that's the tagline for my business, because that's the spot on the 2x2 matrix where we always want to be. And I wonder if there was a moment in your very successful career so far where you knew you were moving in the right direction to be the sort of success that you've come today.
I think it was exactly the moment that I shared with you, coincidentally. When I was tapped to be the CIO, I was baffled. I didn't understand why me. Like, there's so many smart CIOs and executives with the company. And then I realized that it wasn't about being a CIO. Over time, it was that I had a customer-centric approach to this. And I understood technology, obviously. I was passionate about it. But it was more about, how are we helping our customers? How are we thinking through what it is that they need in a time frame that matters to them? And with the budget, with the responsibility, with the goals that, with the it wasn't defined. It was like, give me bragging rights. And you go translate what that means. And, direct access to the executive suite. I was part of the executive suite at that point. That's when I kind of knew, okay, I better grow up quick. This is a step up moment. And you do.
And there you are.
Right. That's right. I was very lucky and very blessed to get that opportunity.
Wow. And change the meaning of the acronym forever. So that's simple.
True.
Well, thank you again for making time for this. I really appreciate it, and wishing you and the Commvault team all the best.
Thank you, Karen. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Take good care.
You too.